My name is Maureen Corrigan. I'm the book critic for Fresh Air on NPR.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. And also a longtime mystery columnist for the Washington Post. I have had the great pleasure and honor of interviewing Sara Paretsky a few times. And I have to tell you, every time I'm in her presence, I am sincerely aware that I'm with someone who has transformed the mystery genre and really put her own stamp on it. I went to the back cover of Shell Game, Sara Paretsky's latest novel, and took a look at the biographical information on the back. And it's pretty simple and monumental, and I'm going to read it in part. Sara Paretsky is the best-selling author of 20 previous novels, including the renowned V.I. Warshawski series. She is one of only 4 living authors, alongside John le Carré, Peter Lovesey, and Lawrence Block, to have received the Grand Master Award from the Mystery Writers of America and the Cartier Diamond Dagger from the Crime Writers Association of Great Britain. That's the award I want to see. Sara was one of the founders of Sisters in Crime in 1986 and served as the organization's first president. She won last year the inaugural Sue Grafton Memorial Award, honoring the best novel in a series featuring a female protagonist. It's such a delight and a thrill to be with you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you. The Cartier Diamond Dagger, it's really a thrilling award, and they give you this thing this big, and which has a minute ruby, diamond, and sapphire in it.
A real one?
Real.
Oh.
And I lost it when I was on tour in Sweden many years ago. And I begged Cartier, and they gave me another one. But I don't think I can go back twice, so I leave it at home instead of wearing it in public.
Oh my God, I wish you had brought it along. We're here to talk mostly about Shell Game, which, if you haven't read it, is a superb Warshawski novel. But Shell Game came out last year. I wanted to talk about a more recent publication of yours.
Okay.
Yeah, and that is a letter to the editor that you sent to the New York Times Book Review a couple of months ago about a mystery roundup that had run in the Times. And you sent a letter objecting to that mystery roundup. And if I can, I'd just like to read the first 3 sentences of your letter to the editor, which had me laughing uncontrollably for at least 10 minutes. You said, "To the editor, when I started reading Vanessa Friedman's thriller roundup, published on June 2nd of this year, I wanted to fly to New York and stand screaming outside your building." You usually don't read letters like that in the New York Times. "Of course, I'm always delighted, thrilled, when women writers are recognized, but Friedman repeats the tired old trope that women have been on the margins of the thriller world forever and are only breaking into it in this #MeToo era." I would like you to give us some background, what prompted that letter, what you were reacting to, and if you received any responses to that letter.
The roundup, excuse me, the roundup that Treadmill did was on thrillers that featured strong women characters. Even more annoying, almost more annoying than her introduction, which was that we had been on the margins and were just starting to be heard, was that the first 2 books she reviewed were by men. It's like, but here's the thing. Women's voices, we bubble up periodically like carrots in a stew, and then we're pushed down again and we disappear. And my reaction covered a lot of ground, which I'll try not to go on forever about, and you know more about the history than I do, but 19th century women thriller writers helped define and create the genre. Anna Catherine Green had an investigating detective, consulting detective, 10 years before Conan Doyle created Sherlock Holmes. Conan Doyle wanted Green's sales. He wrote her, he wanted advice from her on how to market his books. She was the best-selling writer on both sides of the Atlantic, and he writes about seeing wagons going down the Strand piled high with Green's novels and wanting his own books to have that same cachet. Nobody knows who she is anymore, and we all know who Sherlock Holmes is. So all this time, all these years, women keep writing, keep having voices, keep creating strong characters, but somehow we're just not there. And I think this bubbles through all of society. So you start asking whether this woman candidate is electable because it's novel. It's novel to have a woman doing something. If we started realizing that women are always doing these things, that we're just part of this discourse, then the whole conversation would change, I think.
Yeah. When I read your letter to the editor, I was also trying to imagine what was going on in the reviewer's mind, that she would have sort of structured the whole roundup that way, as though this was a new advent in the history of detective fiction. And I wondered if maybe it feels new because we have so many women writers writing in that woman in trouble genre or girl in trouble genre, and that feels like Gone Girl. That feels like it's, I don't know, almost a new strain in detective fiction, as opposed to the kind of novels that you write, that Sue Grafton used to write when she was alive. You know, that maybe that's why.
Yes, and I also think that there's a way in which one of the things that's going on in contemporary thrillers that really troubles me is that the woman protagonist, whether in novels really by men or by women, often has to have been terribly abused and victimized, like in Mo Hader's books or in Stieg Larsson's books. So she can't come to the work out of just the joy of being a professional and out there on stage solving problems. She has to be in recovery from terrible rape and abuse, and then we're given every detail of the rape and abuse. And I'm not sure what that is. I think I always come back to, can women take up space? And we can take up space if we're victims, but we can't take up space if we're powerful.
That's a disturbing thought,
It is, but all that's changing. By tomorrow morning, it will all be different.
I want to talk about Shell Game, which is a novel in which a woman takes up space, not because she's somehow earned it by being victimized, but because she owns it. She's made the effort to own it. It's your 19th V.I. Warshawski novel, and one of the things I do admire about your writing is you really make an effort not to go stale, not to repeat yourself, and you really keep reaching, and I think your novels have grown more ambitious, certainly throughout the years. In Shell Game, you're weaving together a lot of different plots, and you've got one plot which I would almost label the traditional mystery plot, where there's this mystery about a stolen antiquity, which almost feels like the rules for Nancy Drew novel writing. You always have to have some kind of stolen treasure. And then you've also got plot lines that have to do with the situation of undocumented immigrant workers in this country. You've got another plot line that has to do with a long-lost niece by marriage of VI's who's been abused, assaulted by a network of powerful men, almost kind of anticipating some of that Jeffrey Epstein horror that we've been living with over the last few weeks. What are the challenges of writing what, as you know, Graham Greene famously called entertainments, and yet at the same time reaching for writing fiction that's also politically and socially pointed?
I think that I come at it slightly differently in that I'm not trying to write fiction that's politically and socially pointed. I saw recently in a review that, is it Natasha or Natalie Ginsburg, the Italian writer? Anyway, Ginsburg. Natalie, I think you're right. She was a writer in Italy in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and her books are just now being translated into English and reissued. And she lived through the Second World War. Her husband and her brothers were anti-fascist activists who were imprisoned, tortured, killed. And the Second World War formed the leitmotif of most of her fiction, and she was criticized for this. Why couldn't she leave the war alone?
Yeah.
And she wrote that she thought that the writer was a river, and that the writer went with the current of the river and wrote the images that were reflected in the water as she flowed with that current. And for me, the images that are reflected in the water are urgent matters that affect us all day in and day out, and they just end up being the stuff of my stories. I think I was particularly concerned at the start of the story because of at that time, so the book was published in October of 2018, and I started work on it in the summer of 2017. And I was already deeply concerned about the fate of refugees and asylum seekers who were routinely being denied access to this country. And then I always have a subtext with immigrant stories in the sense that I'm one of the American Jews who was born in this country to family that lived here, but most of my family in Europe, my entire family in Europe, was murdered in the Shoah. And so the fact that we shut our doors in the 30s and 40s, this just feels really personal to me that we're doing it again now. And so those issues, because it is so personal to me, come into my stories. When I started writing Shell Game, and I'm not a chess player, I can't think 5 moves ahead. I have an idea, I write it, doesn't work, I move to a different way of trying to tell the story. There's a Syrian refugee who is undocumented in this country and who was a poet, is a poet. And I started writing his poetry. I actually I had couplets that I was going to start each chapter with, but my English editor said that would be like George Eliot, and nobody would read the book because they would feel they were being given a Victorian novel. So I stopped with that. But I had written about him and V.I. having an affair, and he was supposed to be a significant character in this book, but the story just wouldn't gel around him. And so he ends up being kind of the main mover in a way. Forgive me, the main mover of events, but he's very little on stage, and I had to abandon this very beautiful love scene between the two of them. And so she got her second choice, the director of the Oriental Institute, a Middle Eastern museum and scholarly institute in Chicago.
He's not bad.
No, my favorite, well, not my favorite scene, but I had a lot of fun. She's helping them find someone who's broken into the museum, and he holds her by her feet upside down out the window so that she can examine the wall. And I thought, I want to do that. And I tried to talk the man who was actually the director of the institute into trying it with me, but he blenched.
Thinking about university lawsuits, I guess. But you have gotten the kind of pushback, I've read it online, from readers who essentially say what, you know, people say sometimes to Bruce Springsteen, shut up and play.
Right.
You know, I don't want to hear about the politics, shut up and play. Shut up and tell us a mystery story and stop engaging in all this other stuff, you know. And has your publisher or people in the publishing industry, have you gotten that from, I don't know, I guess you can't really talk about that here, but I wonder if it's ever been suggested to you that it would be wiser for you to leave some topics alone?
I don't think it's ever been put to me that it would be wiser. I think that it's stated that I would be more marketable, but not that anyone wants me to stop doing it, but it's a choice that I can make. I actually think I might be less marketable because I wouldn't be writing what I care about. And I used to be published, my publisher used to be Danielle Steele's editor, and she said, you know, if someone like me, ogling Danielle Steele's sales, wanted to write those books, they would just fall flat because Steele writes what is in her heart. And it may not be what's in my heart, but it's you know, and that's what her readers respond to. If it was fake, they wouldn't be lining up to buy it. And so I think if I dropped that aspect of my work, my books would be flat and even less marketable. One of the things that I started, I've gotten more negative mail about Shell Game than any other book that I've written. And there are two things I want to say about that. One is that all of my books are political, but people seem to think that if it deals specifically with party politics or presidential actions, that makes it political. If it deals with social justice issues, it's not political and they don't mind it. And that baffles me, but that just is how it is. But the other thing I started wondering about that I want to explore is, what did people read in the Third Reich or in Franco's Spain? What did they read? People must have read things. There must have been genre fiction of some kind. They weren't all sitting around reading Goethe or Cervantes. And I've been trying to find that out, but I'm a very unskillful online researcher. Every time I try to go through the University of Chicago online search systems, I end up getting things about Babylon. I don't know why. I think no matter what I'm asking about, I think that I confuse the computer so much it just says, okay, Babylon.
Well, you know, and please don't hear my questions as any kind of request from me that you ever change what you're doing, because what you're doing is, it does come from the heart, and it's so vivid and it's so important, as well as entertaining. It does all of that.
That's good.
We're talking about the topic of immigrants and immigration, and one of the things that really strikes me about Shell Game is, you know, VI, those of us who've been following her from the 1980s onward, we know her background. She's Italian, she's Polish, she's from that community in Chicago, white, working class, ethnic. But now, by the time we get to Shell Game, we're in a different Chicago. And VI is going into immigrant communities, you know, that, you know, they're not hers. Right. So she's in an area where there are, for instance, a lot of South Asian immigrants. And there's a interesting scene where she's trying to find a young woman in that community, and she realizes that the folks passing by on the street are looking at her as a white, older woman and thinking, oh, you know, she must be an immigration agent. You know, she's somebody to avoid, watch out for, which is kind of turning the tables on VI. What's your familiarity with those areas, those communities in Chicago now? Because you're such a Chicago writer. And I think of you the way I think of Chandler. Chandler owns LA, you own Chicago. What's your familiarity? Did you have to have guides introduce you to those communities? I'd like to hear about that research.
Well, one of the things that I do is, one of the things that we've learned is that if a lot of people show up for a deportation hearing, the deportee is less likely to have the papers executed and is given another 6-month extension. So I belong to, don't belong in the sense, but I'm part of a group that responds to requests for witnesses at deportation hearings, and through them I've met people mostly in Chicago's Latinx community, but to some extent also in the Syrian immigrant community. And I wouldn't say that I'm deeply knowledgeable or engaged, but that's been kind of my window onto these communities, and also onto a kind of like unconscious stereotypes that you build up. So the first Syrian spokesperson that I met was a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of an English romance novel with her rose petal complexion and blonde hair escaping from under her headscarf, but a Syrian, and it's just been, I think, really, it's frustrating, it's infuriating, and it's also profoundly moving to be with families who have been in this country for, there may be 3 generations, and one person is undocumented and is in danger of being sent back, or the children are now young adults who are DACA young adults and are on the edge of their seats because English is the language they know, and the United States is the country they know, and yeah. So it's, I can read about the neighborhood and the geographical boundaries, but I'm not actually in those neighborhoods as much as I'm interacting with people in these settings for hearings.
Yeah. I'm going to change the tone for a second and just tell you that every time I open up a new V.I. Warshawski novel, I kind of cross my fingers that V.I. is going to have an encounter with her ex-husband, Dick Yarborough. And those of you who've followed V.I. through her life know what I'm talking about. Dick Yarborough is a corporate lawyer, and he and V.I. were married briefly in their youth. You have a great Dorothy Parker line that you give to V.I. in this novel, where she says of that marriage, for whatever it was, 27 months?
Something like that.
Dick pretended that he was interested in social justice, and I pretended that I was interested in his career. And that was kind of it. But he's a major character in this novel, and I love reading about him because he's so slimy and he's so awful, and they so don't belong together. And he keeps her waiting. She schedules an appointment with him in his corporate law office, and he deliberately keeps her waiting in the outside office. And finally, she gets down on the carpet of the waiting room and begins doing leg lifts, which causes him to run in right away. So it's a great scene where she's being sassy and impudent, and he's responding to that. I wanted to ask you this. How did you ever put her together with him? Why did you do that to her?
Well, that's such a good question. And of course, he's gotten more dreadful with time than he was in the beginning. There's one book, I can't remember now which one it is, where he also shows up and plays a role, and she remembers that he was very attached to her father, and that it was after her father's funeral that the marriage really finally disintegrated. But the softer side of Dick has vanished as he's gotten richer and more successful, and I don't know, I have I'm just going to say a good friend and not reveal her identity, but she was married to, she was putting her husband through law school, and the day that, this was in the 60s, so the day that she came home to tell him that she thought the marriage was over because she'd been mistaken in her sexuality, he announced that he was having an affair with the woman whom she had thought was her closest straight friend. And so it just, you know, these are mistakes of youth.
Yes.
But also I think that, sorry, I keep trying to cover up the mic when I'm hacking. But, you know, she says in one of the novels that she wanted to belong to the Anglo world that he represented. And I had another friend, oh, am I rambling too much? I had another friend, a German Jewish film scholar who left Germany and came to the States when she was in her 20s. And she hated being the only Jew for 500 miles around, and she married the son of an SS colonel. And the marriage foundered. He mistreated her pet duck, and then he said he decided his father had been right all along and that Jews really were responsible for everything that was wrong in Europe, and so that was kind of the end of the marriage.
Oh,
so that was a more extreme version of what, so it happens. You know? All I can say is that people do make mistakes, and fortunately many of them recover from those mistakes.
Well, I hope this isn't the end of Dick, although he's put in his place in this novel, isn't he?
He's not in the new book. Too many people are not in the new book. There wasn't room for them. But they'll all have to, the one that's being published in 2020, they'll all have to come back for the next one after that.
We talked a little about VI's background. I just want to touch on some of the things I learned about your background from a wonderful memoir you published a few years ago called Writing in an Age of Silence. And you know, things I didn't know about you, that you had 4 brothers, and your father had a PhD. Your mother went to college and was admitted to med school but didn't go, and that they treated you very differently from how your brothers were treated when the matter of college came up. You were basically told, go to the University of Kansas, and that was the only choice, otherwise no college, right? And we don't have 3 hours, but I wonder if you could give all of us sort of a taste of what made you, with those kinds of messages being sent to you by your parents, how did you get from there to here? You have a PhD, you have an advanced degree, an MBA, as well as an undergrad degree, of course, and you're Sara Paretsky. How do you do that?
You know, there were pluses as well as minuses. I came from my parents were great readers. My mother was a great storyteller and social justice advocate. So those were things that informed my life as well. I think that I was a very angry person, and I was, you know, like the PhD I was determined to prove to my father that I was as intelligent as my brothers, and that was that wasn't, better guidance and advice might have saved the world another dissertation. But I was also Yeah, I wrote from a very young age, and just things, short stories, poetry, my posthumous works, these are. But I didn't imagine writing for publication. I didn't imagine having a voice that other people wanted to hear. And in fact, speaking, I have friends who tell me that back, 40 years ago, before all this started happening, they thought they were going deaf when I was talking to them, because my brothers and I all developed the habit of speaking really softly, because the criticism over what we said was so ferocious within the family setting. And so it took a long time to develop a sense of strength and a sense of voice. And two things really made a big difference in my life. One was second wave feminism. And I began seeing that I began seeing a context for my story that it wasn't personal to me. It wasn't because there was something wrong with me. It was a social, universal, or at least very widespread issue. And the other thing is that unlike VI, I married very fortunately. I married a man who, I'm sorry, I can't go on. He died recently, but he had great confidence in my voice. And he was endlessly supportive and proud of what I did. And it made it very possible. And in fact, finishing work on the most recent book, which I sent to my editors a week ago today, I didn't know if I could finish it without, Courtney always called himself Tailgun Charlie. He was the man who had my back. But I did finish it, so I guess I can go on. And I'm so sorry to lose my composure, but my next number will be very happy, peppy one.
No, it's why people love you. You are in your books, and you are authentic. So, I did want to go back to asking you something about the form, because we both like to think about this amazing hard-boiled detective fiction form that's an all-American product, and it's a form that you've reworked, and I think you've expanded the possibilities of it, and women of your generation, women writers of your generation, certainly broke open so many barriers. One thing that you do that I feel like not enough detective fiction writers, avail themselves of the possibilities of the series form as being a big extended novel. And that you're always adding to VI's alternative family, a family of affinity, a family of choice. We've got people who've been there from the beginning, like Mr. Contreras and Lottie Herschel, but of late you've added people like Petra, a niece, and in this novel you've got two nieces who pop up after many years of not being in touch, two nieces by marriage, and VI seems to, not a maternal role, but certainly a beloved female mentor role, I think, to them, and certainly someone who also schools them in the possibilities of what a woman can be, enlarges those possibilities. And you've also aged VI, and not quite to where she actually should be in real life. Rereading Shell Game in preparation for talking with you, I was struck by how many chapters open up with VI saying, "I was exhausted. my legs felt like concrete." And she's also waking up a lot in the middle of the night, and her mind is whirring, and I can relate to that. How far can you take that?
Well, I think it got to be extreme in Shell Game, her exhaustion, and So I tried to be mindful of that in working on the next book. There's also, I would say, sometimes I have a friend, a writer in Chicago, Carol Anshaw, very underappreciated fiction writer, who's taken up painting, and she calls herself an autodidact, which I always think sounds like an extinct bird. But as a writer, I'm an autodidact. So it's hard for me to make a separation between who I am and what I'm writing. And I actually had a very funny letter. In England, there is an Armagnac Society, and the president of the Armagnac Society wrote me, I feel very vain about this, so I'm bragging about it. But he said, in your early books, VI drank lots of lovely Armagnac, and lately she hasn't. What happened? And I thought, oh my God, poor VI, because I no longer can handle alcohol well.
Yeah.
I had inadvertently dialed back her alcohol consumption. And so I'm making a conscious effort to let the girl detective drink more.
You're here.
And so I'm thinking also, because I'm not sleeping well and I'm waking up with my legs feeling like they're encased in concrete. No, she doesn't need to be doing that. She's younger, she's vital, she's fit, and she knows how to sleep.
Well, I am, as I think many people here, I'm looking forward to the next outing and seeing this rejuvenated VI and having her take a little break from these escapades in the forest in the middle of the night and everything else that she's doing. She's incredible. I would love to talk some more, but I want to open up, in the time we have left, I'd like to give people the opportunity to ask questions and have some conversation with the audience, because you have a lot of fans here who've been following VI since the very beginning, I'm sure. So if there are microphones in the middle of the aisles, please don't be shy. I went on too long, and we only have about, 7 minutes left for questions, comments, 5 minutes left, oh my goodness. So please jump up if there's anything that you would like to say or ask.
You can ask me anything, and if I don't know, I'll make up the answer.
Hi. I just want to thank you. I've read your books, all of them, and always wait for the next one to come out. And I just want to say how much I appreciate your courage in terms of taking on some of these harder issues. I appreciate your feminist perspective in VI, and the approach she takes to life, because she's really a no shit kind of person. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for being such a strong role model for women and speaking out on social justice issues that are very important. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Hi. I wanted to ask a question about technique. Do you outline your novels? Do you write the scenes and then put them together? Do you have a special method?
The question is about process. Do I outline or do I write scenes and put them together? I think people who outline are people who, I think of chess players versus tennis players, and maybe that's not understanding either game well, but chess players can see this happening, and I can't. I have to write and see how it's happening, and if I have characters in motion who aren't telling the story well, then I have to throw it out and go back and start over. And so I think of myself more as a tennis player, having to respond to the ball in motion as it comes to me. I always start with the idea of the mega crime, the big crime that's driving the story, and I know who's committed that crime and why, but all of the side characters that I need and the subplots I need for telling that story, those I get to by trial and error. my fourth book, Bitter Medicine, I actually wrote through from beginning to end without any deviation or discarding, and I thought, oh boy, I know what I'm doing now. And wrong, that was the only book that happened with. Shell Game, this was the 7th storyline that I tried before I got to the right one, which is why I write more slowly than my publishers like.
Hi. So your books and Sue Grafton's books are considered, because you have strong female protagonists in the hard-boiled detective fiction that wasn't strongly representative previously to your books. I was just wondering, because many people cite you as, inspiration. Are there any young authors or anything, currently that you say, yes, they're carrying on the mantle that I have, that we started?
There are a lot of really good writers right now, and of course my brain has become completely blank now as I'm on the spot with this. But I think, I never get her name right, Rachel Hall Housel, whose books are set in LA. I think she's done some standalones and some cop novels, and I like her kind of tough woman police detective. I think she does a great job with that. Someone who's not brand new, but sort of the next generation after me, whose books I love, is Nevada Barr. In the UK, Denise Mina, fabulous writer. There are a lot. Read Maureen's reviews and more will come to you.
It is so hard to see up here. We're like,
Hi, I have a question about the VI character. Since she's so much a part of you, did you ever get mad at her?
VI, do I take it personally? Do I get mad at her? I think the shoe is on the other foot. I think if she actually knew me, she would think I'm such a wimp that she would reject me as the person who was writing her memoirs, so to speak. Yeah, we had rats in my basement not too long ago, and I make my dog come down the stairs with me, and she has to be bribed. She's like a rug with a heartbeat. So she has to be bribed with liver treats to get up and come down the basement stairs with me. But I think VI would just be there. Maybe she'd pull out her Smith & Wesson and put a few bullets in them. I don't know.
does she inspire you at all to be bolder? Because I was thinking of her, I actually was thinking of her this morning. I live in a row house in DC, and every once in a while the neighbor to the left parks his second car in a way that blocks our little garage. And I said to my husband this morning, I'm going to go over and knock on his door. And I was thinking about VI. I was just finishing Shell Game, and I felt like she had rubbed off on me some.
Ace.
Yeah.
I think, does she rub off on me? Yes, to have a voice and not be sort of passive-aggressive in situations like that. And I actually have an incoming neighbor who's building a McMansion right up against my property line, or the property line between us. And there have been issues, some of which I've been passive-aggressive about. For instance, he's a professor of economics, and so in my new book, the bad guy is an economist. Now, that's pretty passive-aggressive, but I've also been more forthright when they've spilled stuff on my car, demanding that they pay to clean my car and things like that. So yeah, yeah. The girl detective strikes back.
In a way that Nancy Drew somehow never
Right.
rubbed off, except maybe her language. I think we're out of time, according to 20 seconds. Anybody have a quick last question? Oh, yep, someone's running to the mic.
Quickly, I wonder if you could tell us if there are any predecessors in the genre, hard-boiled genre, who were positive, big influence on you.
Well, there's a writer named Michael Lewin, Michael Z. Lewin, who, again, an under-recognized writer. He was from Indianapolis, and at the same time that Parker was writing the Spencer novels, Michael was writing a series, and he was really the first boiled less hard writer, and someone whose character was, the women in it were respected. They weren't vamps or virgins or victims. And it was at the time that I was trying to formulate VI and trying to figure out how to write a book, and it was helpful to have his example that, yeah, there was room in the genre for that kind of respect for women.
Yeah. I've got a sign in front of me that says, "Wrap it up." It's rather rude. So we are going to wrap it up.
Thank you
so much, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.